Thanks very much, and welcome back to our program. It is my pleasure to welcome back Chuck Malamut, and the following program segment is paid for by Chuck, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck and do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast and are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, the official financial advisor to Early in the Morning, Chuck Malamut. Morning, Chuck.
Harry, good morning.
I would say, how was your weekend? But I know, like me, all we do is work. So we worked all weekend. You worked all weekend. But happy Tuesday. It does feel like Monday, though, doesn't it?
It definitely feels like Monday, Harry. It's waking up and not listening to the best of Hurley. I knew it was Tuesday.
But yes.
But the best of Hurley,
it was strong, though, yesterday.
The best of Hurley was exceptional.
Including the sort of instant classic that was my 30 or so minutes with the president of Stockton University, Dr. Harvey Kesselman, who this is what I was projecting would happen. It's an amazing result that the president is able to stay, because he obviously had been coveted and won an incredible national search to become the president of the University of Southern Maine. And to show you how incredible their search was, Dr. Kesselman won the search and would have been the next president had he not been able to stay at Stockton University. The candidate that finished second and the candidate that finished third are already both president, either in office or president-selects of major universities around the country. This was a really amazing search. So actually Southern Maine lost their first three choices with Dr. Kesselman staying here at Stockton. But I understand that a former state senator who is very highly regarded in Maine is probably, I think he is going to be the president. But we're very, very fortunate because you know what this is like, Chuck. You've been there in different key positions that you have held at the highest levels, where when you get the right person at the right time for the right job, it doesn't always work this way, but I'm absolutely convinced that Stockton University could not be in better hands.
Harry, certainly needed at the absolute right time. There's no doubt about it. As I drove past Seaview this morning on the way in, it's great to see the LPGA is back. I'm hoping for a good week, and that's obviously all good news for Stockton for sure. But when you look at the end, it's been very, very quiet. I've been actually kind of surprised, Harry. I saw a headline today in the paper regarding Showboat, but between Showboat and Rebel, it just seems as if sort of taking a back seat with everything else that's going on in Atlantic City. But
here's the key, though: it's not taking a back seat with Dr. Kesselman.
No. But I'm saying with the media, what they've done here is they seem to have moved on.
Because the summer's here, there's a lot of things to talk about, and they're not obsessed on something that right now. You know how sometimes if you're working on a project that's not ready yet to be revealed to anyone, you're working like crazy on it, and there's just nothing new to report. I know this to be true. Dr. Kesselman and the committees that he has put together, they are working feverishly on fixing this thing because, as you no doubt know, and we've been breaking these numbers on a pretty consistent basis. Right now, Stockton University, this fits in with the Malamut Financial Hour because it is quite financial. Stockton University carrying costs are at $500,000 per month. That's with no revenue associated with the expense. How long can you do something like that?
Harry, unless you have an endless supply of currency, U.S. dollars in particular,
it's $1 million every 2 months.
You're going to be on the short end of the stick, fairly quickly. I mean, obviously, they have a lot to get through in a relatively short period of time, and we are looking this to be successful because the economics of this and what Stockton provides the local community, I think, is immeasurable. I think we can kind of get a real good idea as to what the closings of all these casinos have resulted, but the multiplier effect of a successful university just does wonders for a community.
And it's going to happen. Stockton has wanted for over a decade, more than a decade, to have a true presence in Atlantic City. It is going to happen, and I almost will guarantee it in the Harvey Kesselman era. It will happen, and then that will not only be great for Stockton University, it will be great for Atlantic City.
There's no doubt about it, Harry. I mean, all the pundits have come out and have stated all the negativity as to why this cannot be accomplished. But I think you have to really look at what with the glass being half full. How it can happen, when it can happen, how quickly can it happen, and how successful it can be.
Here's another thing too. And I don't, me, Chuck, I don't like to kick a guy when he's down. Sotkamp went out like a bum. I mean, what he did to me was terminable. He shouldn't even have been able to resign. He should have been terminated. It shouldn't be that he's even still on the books into the summer and that a great man like Dr. Kesselman has to be the acting president while this charade goes on. Here's what I think. I think that Dr. Sotkamp tried to go vertical. And I think what you're going to see, and I think that's because he wanted to live in the penthouse, to be honest with you. And sources of mine have told me that he had the penthouse. That was going to be his home. So he went vertical so he could have the penthouse. Kesselman, I think, is going to go horizontal. I don't think we're going to see a Stockton. You know what I mean by going vertical?
Yes, absolutely.
Not going hotel, but going horizontal and having a much bigger footprint that will involve many other things, athletics. If you've ever, and I've been doing a lot of research, I'm going to be breaking some news before anybody in the market relative to Stockton, but there are examples about what I think Stockton is going to do in Atlantic City that have proven to be hugely successful in other parts of the country.
Harry, if you've seen other college towns develop around the universities, respectively, and if I mean, perfect case in point is College Park. Texas A&M. I mean, you can't say it any better. I mean, things, in the city of Baltimore up until recently, they seem to have They have gotten it correct. So there's just so much work that needs to be done, and I guess we're on the right path here. I mean, Memorial Day weekends seem to be very busy. Particularly, unfortunately, as you turn south, I was traveling the Garden State Parkway north fairly early on Saturday, and then late the evening before, dinner time on Friday, and it's just simply amazing the amount of traffic that is diverting off the Atlantic City Expressway to the Garden State Parkway exit 7S.
So they were going to Cape May.
Cape May, Avalon, Sea Isle, Ocean City. Coming northbound, you don't see the traffic that's flowing into Atlantic City, but all indications that I've been given that Atlantic City had a pretty successful weekend. I
understand it was very, very busy. In fact, I was told Atlantic City was packed, that the hotels did great, the night spots did great, food and beverage. And we'll see what the numbers are going to reveal in the not-too-distant future. But I think it was a very successful weekend.
But remember, Harry, the amount of room inventory that has been taken out of the system, along with the much-needed parking.
Yeah,
that ultimately can cause gridlock in the town, and while it seems busier than it really on a comparative basis it wasn't compared to say 2 years ago.
True, but then you look at the bottom line, and the existing casinos are doing better than they were doing when there was 12.
Most certainly.
And with the summer basically here now, unofficial start of summer season now just a day or so behind us, I think it's going to be a very, very good summer. Chuck, give us your market update.
Well, Harry, last week seemed to be very, very quiet as we got into the holiday mode. For the week, the Dow Jones, was down 0.2%. So year to date, we're up 2.3%. The Nasdaq was up less than 1%. So that's clearly the winner, up about 7.5%. And the S&P 500 was up, 0.2%, or 3.3% for the week. Very, very narrow trading range on a comparative basis. Not a lot of volatility compared to what we have seen previously. And oftentimes, that typically does happen as you get into the midst of a holiday weekend. But a couple interesting things happened, and we'll kind of work our way up through Friday, where I found it very interesting, Harry, that Friday before Memorial Day weekend, Janet Yellen was out speaking, and it did get a fair amount of press with respect to what her thought process is regarding interest rates. And then over the weekend, a big merger was announced. Charter Communication, buying Time Warner Cable, and if you remember, just recently, the government, basically told Comcast you're not going to be able to, do a deal with Time Warner. So in a relatively short period of time, the deal got a lot sweeter for Time Warner Cable, to the tune of about $191 a share, which is a $20 premium over the close on Friday. And I believe Friday that stock was up in excess of 5 points. So what you're going to see with Charter and buying Time Warner Cable is that now a formidable opponent, so to speak, with respect to Comcast. And there's been all kinds of discussion whether or not this is going to actually happen, because the last time the government came in and said no, we're not going to allow it because Comcast has too big of a footprint. But it seems as if, in listening to the analysts that are all chatting about this transaction, is there is a very, very high probability that this is going to go and it's going to work. So I guess the best what you got to take a look at is look out Comcast. You now have a player that's going to compete fiercely against you.
Interesting how when people look at these things and they decide that something becomes too big, then you look at other examples where you could say, well, how come this got approved? I don't think this would surprise anybody, Chuck. I think there was politics involved in that more than just the size of what the cable, and I guess it's even more than cable at this point, because you have your whole internet and all the other platforms that are involved too, where it's interesting how we used to have cable on one hand, phone on the other, and now they're really all just phone, digital, cable, whatever. It's all I never believed that was for the reasons that were stated to us.
Harry,
and by the way, wouldn't this still be very big, what we're talking about now?
What you have now is that when you look at this particular merger, $55 billion in cash and stock, and Charter is going to pay $195.71 a share, which is 14% above the close on Friday. And Charter is now the fourth, prior to this proposed transaction, Charter is the fourth biggest cable company, and hooking up with Time Warner, number two. So now you have, again, 2 and 4 combining.
So 2 and 4 is not too high consolidation or concentration, rather, but 1, 2 might be. I think it proves my point. There was something here that became objectionable that didn't have to do with the deal itself, I think.
What's surprising, Harry, is the fact that the deal itself seems to make sense, and Time Warner was looking. There's no doubt about it, but the fact is the price seems rather high. When you just look at the deal that was accepted, and which ultimately the government rejected. So as a result of it, the shareholders of Time Warner Cable should be very, very happy, with the U.S. government, because now they are, pushing more cash into the shareholders' pockets.
Isn't it true, though, Chuck, in business that sometimes it's worth one company paying a premium to do something that's good for their brand? Like, I think, for example, that the entity overpaid for AOL. I think AOL, to get the Huffington Post platform to pay what was it, $4.4 billion?
It was $4.5 billion.
I mean, come on. So I think sometimes people will overpay to get something that they think is worth that type of value to their brand.
Well, I like how you refer to the Huffington Puff. That was not a mistake.
It was Freudian.
Okay. Yeah, Verizon was definitely looking for two things, Harry. They had the pipes. They were looking for content, and they're looking for advertising. And I think when you look at, again, we can, this kind of is a pretty good segue because we can talk a little bit about Yellen and what she had to say this past Friday. There is a formidable amount of cash sitting on balance sheets of a lot of U.S. corporations, and whether that is publicly traded companies which have the ability to either merge or consolidate or buy back stock in an effort to increase the value of the individual share price, or maybe even some of the larger privately held companies. And that is a direct correlation, Harry, with respect to these low interest rates that we've lived through for all these years. I think what companies are continually faced with is the ongoing sagas that they have to live through on a day-to-day basis as our government comes in and basically creates more rules and more regulations in an effort to patrol, so to speak, what goes on in corporate America. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is, corporate America is often viewed as a villain. And in fact, I think, Harry, it should be just directly the opposite, trying to, create wealth, trying to create an economy that works well, trying to create capital. I don't think that's such a bad thing.
No. Well, see, it's as simple as this. You're not going to say this, and you never have in 25 years, but I can and I will. The one political party demonizes, or this would never exist. It would be a much different reputation. It would be, wow, these are the people that provide jobs. They create jobs. They're the good guys. I read a phenomenal column, and even parts of it I read over the air. I don't know if I can find the exact part that fits so well into your program, Chuck, but I'll paraphrase it if I can't find it. They were referring to the last 7 years, and it's so many words. It's like 2,000 words. I'm not going to find it, but it was a description of the last 7 years, in that recovery over the past 7 years has been a little bit of growth and then no growth, a little bit of growth and then no growth. And this has repeated again and again and again and again. I think a large part of why that has been the case, number one, they're failed policies that don't work. They don't inspire confidence. They don't inspire people to invest because people are being penalized right now for creating jobs. If you create too many jobs, you actually get hurt by this government. But I also think it has been the Fed that sees how poorly things have been going, and they have kept these rates so incredibly historically low that it actually allows for this anemic growth. And then if they stop, and then there's been many examples, Chuck, that you and I have chronicled all of them, from quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, however many rounds of that there were, to keeping rates down. So that I think the Fed deserves great credit over the past 7 years for keeping us where we are, which is sort of treading water, while financial markets have done very well.
Harry, I think the best word to describe what has happened over this last 7 years with growth has been muted. It is the fact that every time we seem to want to get started, there's always something that happens to kind of push things back a little bit. And, that old adage, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I think that's what we've been living through for any of a number of years here. And now we're seeing it more locally than we've never been through times like this. There's no doubt about it. Even, Harry, I think we were kids, but...
Would you say the 60s were like this?
Well, I think we were too young to really recognize it. But if we listened astutely to our parents, I think the takeaway that I got, and I think that you got as well, was that it was very, very trying.
And I think that was even worse than what we see now.
And there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And you know what today is? Do you have any idea what happened today in 1978?
Did Resorts
today was the
day
Resorts International opened its doors for legalized gambling in Atlantic City in 1978.
And then look what that did for 35 years of unbridled, just recession-proof growth until too much gaming product came online. Trivia question, when you go through, I don't know if they still do it at resorts, but they did it when I was an executive, when you went through your employee orientation, the corporate entity to Resorts Atlantic City.
Oh, I know this one.
The Mary Carter Paint Company.
Yes.
Which is a great trivia question.
And it was, Harry, you know,
think about that. That's hilarious, isn't it?
I remember as a kid, and not to reminisce because I'm going to get off track here a little bit, but the brokerage houses on Atlantic Avenue, I think between Arkansas and Michigan, perhaps, and clients were just lined up, waiting to get in the door to open accounts.
Do you remember
to buy the gaming stocks?
Like in future years, they would put at the dealer table, they would have those little clear chips.
Yes.
And if you wanted to go to the restroom, you could put one of those down. In the early days, people were literally urinating at the chair, because if you left, you lost your spot. And there was, I don't even want to say, a dozen rows back behind you that wanted your chair. It was amazing.
It was remarkable times. There's no doubt about it. And
we were very fortunate, Chuck, you and I, to come of age at a time when we were young adults, and we got to be a part of history. I mean, something that had never existed. Because when I accepted my position, I said to somebody, I'll leave the press. I'm happy. I mean, I was making like 5 figures at the press. I wasn't even making $10,000 a year. I think it was like $8,000 a year or something. I said, I'm happy to leave. I said, but understand, I don't have any experience in the hotel casino industry. And the person said to me, neither do the rest of us. You'll be great. You work hard. You'll be great. You'll learn. I mean, we were given an opportunity to do jobs, Chuck, that say, like in your case, because your name, your brand, your dad, you owned hotels, you probably could have achieved what you did. I never would have been able to achieve what I did. I didn't have Cornell Hotel University School. I could never have been a senior hotel executive and run a 4-diamond, 4-star hotel for Donald Trump. But this industry gave people like us an opportunity.
Harry, it's very unfortunate what the industry is going through now, because it's an exact reversal.
Oh, it's so true.
Of what we grew up and became very.
Do you remember our jobs compendium, Chuck?
Absolutely.
We would have a line staff, then a lead attendant, then there would be an assistant supervisor and a supervisor and a manager and assistant managers and directors and executive directors. We had so many layers, and everybody had free health care. It was Cadillac coverage. I mean, you didn't pay any deductibles that I remember. I mean, it was incredible, Chuck.
Yeah, but Harry, I think what your listeners need to clearly understand it was, while there was a considerable amount of cash flow generating through these facilities, which ultimately created profits to the owners, the fact of the matter is we were held to a very, very high standard, probably a higher standard that we lived through than what is happening now, because
I agree with that.
Unfortunately, mediocrity is now acceptable. And I think that is not so much just here in the product that is available for the most part, because it has to be, because you don't have the cash flow to do the necessary capital improvements, and you just do enough to get by.
Chuck, you and I had capital improvement budgets substantially more than what hotel casinos are selling for now. 1 year's capital improvement budget.
Well, Harry, unfortunately, as you know, there's way too much competition, and hopefully this summer will prove out well for the casinos that are left standing. I think obviously the marina seems to be in very good shape, and it's just a matter of what happens on the boardwalk, and can the boardwalk be reinvigorated to create an aura of wanting to get there and spend time in those facilities and, spend your capital.
It is interesting. My best run for me when I hit the top was at a marina property then called Trump Castle Casino Resort by the Bay. I always knew the marina was like a sleeper, that ultimately the marina was going to be where it's at. Whether we had the Trump Princess right there at what's called Farley State Marina. It was an interesting thing. Donald Trump built the marina But to get all the approvals and things, it had to be the Farley State Marina. It was kind of hilarious. It was their marina, and he paid everything. But, Chuck, those were incredible times. They'll never be again. Never.
No, Harry. I think, unfortunately, in our lifetime, what's very, very important, at least on a short-term basis, is to be able to right the ship, create an environment that it's easier said than done. As an outsider, we can say all this, but we're not living through it day to day. But create an environment where it becomes a very, very attractive for visitors to want to come and spend time in Atlantic City. And
Chuck, we're going to go to break. I just want to add the following. When I say it will never be like that again, it's because it cannot be like that again because we're no longer a monopoly. And Chuck is one of the very few people that prior to June 5th has read my 2,518-word opus. This is my
You went 18 words over budget.
I know. I did say it to my editor, too, and I think they did print every word of it. I went 18 words above, but they were very creative because I have a copy of what it's going to look like in the magazine. They put some of the beginning in the headline.
There we go.
And so I think we'll be under 2,500 words beneath the headline. But my column titled Atlantic City's Rebirth, Here's How It's Going to Happen, which is in the upcoming New Jersey Lifestyle magazine that will be out literally within 2 weeks. June 5th, I believe, is the release date. We show that Atlantic City several times since 1853 has had significant moments of truth, Chuck. And you've read and you've been complimentary of my piece, which not only is a historical sort of primer, but also I cite what I believe will take us into our next rebirth of Atlantic City. Because the one thing about Atlantic City, when your dad was owning hotels in Atlantic City, it was maybe a destination resort where doctors were telling people, like my dad moved to Atlantic City. It was like a health-related type thing. And, of course, a destination resort. The train that was built to come to Atlantic City, and actually the owner of the railroad owned the Capitol Hotel in Atlantic City, which was the biggest hotel in the country at the time. So we do all the background, but we also talk about how this Chuck Malamut is literally just Atlantic City's latest sort of moment of truth, where what we were, we can no longer be for reasons that are well known now. Too much gaming product. So we can't be just that. We have to be that to the extent that we can with fewer properties, and then become the true destination resort that we're capable of becoming with the non-casino attractions. And I really believe that 1 year from now, when Meeting Professionals International, MPI, as they're best known, and their 2,000 all-stars come into Atlantic City, and each of them responsible to book 7 big events somewhere in America, that we have an opportunity to truly take that next leap, not a leap of faith, but a leap of competence into what Atlantic City will be. And that will be a combination of a gaming mecca that's half the size of what it used to be, but a destination resort from a non-gaming revenue standpoint that hopefully could be 5 times more than it is presently.
Harry, that absolutely has to be 100% perfect. That the week they are here, there can't be a flaw.
Yeah, that it can't get paper towels and no air conditioning in the rooms.
There can't be anything wrong.
Yeah.
So if you remember the things that we did in advance of a big weekend, where remember when one of the board of directors would come, and the prep work that we had to do, and the prep work we had to do before AAA showed up. That's what absolutely has to be done and orchestrated well in advance prior to MPI arriving.
Exactly, because they are the ones. They're like the 1964 Democratic National Convention. They're this era's equivalent of the national media that can either come to praise you or come to bury you. And if they have a horrible experience, which I know is not going to happen, because all the things you said, Chuck, are going to happen between Meet AC, the Harris people, Caesars people, all of Atlantic City, everybody stepping up to understand that these 2,000 people, their impression when they leave, perception is reality until it's otherwise changed. Their perception will be our reality. and it can be like chubby little Al Roker telling the whole country that the boardwalk in Atlantic City is destroyed. Don't come to Atlantic City. The boardwalk has been destroyed because he's on some broken piece that was already slated to be removed. And we spent the better part of 2 years trying to say that it never happened. Oh, we want to book there, but we want to give you a chance to get rebuilt. No, we don't have to be rebuilt. We're unbuilt. And you just tried to explain that lie, that falsity. And it was incredible. That cost, I'm convinced, that cost Atlantic City tens of millions of dollars. Brief time out, one more power segment with Chuck Malamut straight ahead. We're back 38 minutes past the hour. The official financial advisor, Chuck Malamut, to the Early in the Morning program. And for all of your financial planning needs, turn to Chuck, who is the leader of his group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, the Malamut Group, 609-383-2010. Hey, Chuck, I'm just writing a good friend of the program who wrote in, have you guys ever heard the name Jack Penman, bigwig in hotels pre-casino?
Absolutely, Jack. Jack was a very, very important part of my life as I was growing up, and he was sort of what I'll describe as a surrogate father, and not to share stories with your wide range of listeners, but let's just suffice it to say, if there was something that we did, because I know we all did it as young adults or children, that perhaps we shouldn't have done, and rather than take the wrath of a parent, the general manager of the operation was charged with that particular responsibility. And Jack did a wonderful job of it. And
So you're saying maybe Chuck and Bill Malamut antics. I don't know about Larry. I won't bring him into this one, but maybe a little bit of Chucky and Billy.
I won't. I don't know Bill so much. It's definitely things that I had done as a child turning a young adult that I think would be frowned upon for sure. And so Jack had the formidable task of making absolutely certain that I understood what I did and trying to understand why I did it and trying to then get me on the right course. And it kind of put my dad in a whole different –
he was a little buffer.
Whole different aura where, and here was a man that was in basically not only is my dad, but is in charge of this large organization at the time and making absolutely certain that that his son was being well attended to. So I will tell you stories off air and not to be shared with your wide range of listening audience, because I think the stories were nothing short of remarkable way back when.
Brother Bill writes in. Chuck was a problem child. Billy writes in.
I'm not going to say a problem child. I just kind of paved the way to make things easier for my other brothers. We'll leave it at that.
But I will say this, though. From the time I met you as a young adult, your head was on straighter than anybody I've ever known. You were so focused. You're still that way. So task-driven, focused, that I'll put it to you this way. Anybody out there listening, if you were not a hard worker, you could not work for Chuck Malamut. It just wouldn't. It would not happen. It could not happen. You would be completely incompatible. So to answer Mike's very kind email or text message to the program, Jack Penman worked for Chuck's dad for many, many years.
Absolutely, and he was, like I said, he spent a lot of time, making certain that we were raised effectively. Harry, we're running, I think, real short on time here as it looks. A lot going on this week, as I mentioned, the Charter Communication Time Warner deal. Oil seems to be back. The prices as you drive by daily, seem to have either reached somewhat of a pinnacle, but then once you get there, they keep moving. You take a pause and then they move higher. So,
how about 2 minutes on mergers?
Well, Harry, as I mentioned to you, you had the deal recently with Time Warner. You had the week before. You have the AOL Verizon deal. Every week we see a deal coming a lot of times out of the biotechnology space. So that means if companies are willing to buy other companies, that there's going to be value in the marketplace. So as a result of that, we seem to think that those deals will continue, but I think what your listeners and investors need to recognize is the fact that, don't try to cherry pick and figure out where the next deal is coming from. Make sure you're absolutely invested effectively, for the long term.
Very interesting. Chuck, anything a listener wrote in? I love this. That's why I was laughing just a moment ago, smiling in Chuck's face while he was doing his closing summation here. It reads, this is not Billy, it's another listener. From a problem listener, I enjoy this hour. Problem listener. I love it. And this person is very interested in financial matters and very, very smart in financial matters. Is Greece is going to have a problem making a payment, aren't they?
Harry, they are, and what is happening now? We're getting towards the end, so to speak, and the question at hand is Greece capable of making that payment? And it seems as if, from all indications, that they're not. And how is the market going to react to this sort of negative news? I think that the fact that it is a very, very small piece that is obviously helpful to what they're living through. But Harry, if you take a look back at the history of Greece, I think what is happening now is no different than what happened 10, 15 years ago. So the markets will in fact survive.
So in other words, if anybody watched my TV closing summation where Dawn Stensland-Menti and Larry Menti had me be their closer in this great 1 hour special that they did, all about Atlantic City, I talked about past is prologue. It's so true in many aspects in life. There's nothing new about Greece.
Well, I think what's happening, Harry, is the fact now, because they can't make the payments back to the IMF unless it gets a deal with their creditors, and as a result of that, that may or may not happen. So they've been shut out of the bond markets. With bailout, they've been locked. There's no cash, so to speak, in Athens. So they're doing everything they can to meet their debt obligations and be able to pay wages and those dreaded and the pensions. So their future as a member of the 19-nation Eurozone is now obviously at stake. And so what we're going to see is, can they in fact and I think they will have, kick the can down the road once again in an effort to try to, get back into the marketplace and be able to raise some much needed capital.
Chuck, as always, well done, my friend. You've been listening to Chuck Malamut. Chuck, as I mentioned, leads the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, 609-383-2010 for all of your financial planning needs. Tell Chuck I sent you. If you heard me bring him up, I'd appreciate that. The following program that you've listened to is paid for by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck and do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast and are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Chuck will reconvene in 1 week or sooner if any breaking news arises.
Harry, thanks again for having me. Have a good week.
You too, my man. We'll be back. If you want to jump in, 609-407-1450. This is our last open two-way segment. Dr. Bob Zlotnick coming up in our fourth quarter in about 20 minutes from now. But we'll have a good 10 minutes when we come back. Wide open forum. 609-407-1450. I'm Hurley in the morning. This is WPG. Talk Radio 1450, South Jersey's talk station.